Again, it's the day after the game before, and Liverpool, sad to say, crashed down in Birmingham against Aston Villa by 4 goals to 2. Now, I'm going to discuss much more about the manager, as I think most Liverpool fans are, than about the game itself. All I can say about the game is I'm the coach here in Boston that's retired, but still coaches 5 days a week. So I didn't get to see the game live. And one thing I hate having to do, I can't wait until the game is finished, without knowing the score. So I go home to watch the game knowing that Liverpool have lost and lost comprehensively. And that doesn't exactly thrill me with excitement. So I think we saw the same old that we've seen so many times this year. And Aston Villa are clearly on the rise with a Europa League Cup final next year, guaranteed Champions League, one way or another. And that they certainly did last night at Villa Park. So the discussion is about the manager from Liverpool fans across the board, and rightly so. And I'm hearing a lot about it is not the Liverpool way to sack the manager. And I think you've got some of the journos saying that because of their connections with the club. You've got a lot of former Liverpool players saying that, obviously maybe for more political reasons. And then you have a lot of fans of my generation. I go back to the Shankly days, basically because of the traditions of the club. But I think that this is one time when I think that they have to change the tune. So why is that? And I think it's because we've had 2 years of Arne Slot, and we've clearly seen how Arne Slot coaches. Now, this season, there have been lots of, and I think the quote is, mitigating circumstances, and they have. But I think that when he joined the club and he took over from Jurgen Klopp, there were also quite a lot of mitigating circumstances as well. So let's look at what those circumstances were. First of all, he took over at a big club that had a very strong, settled squad. So that is pretty unusual if you're looking at some of our rivals like Manchester United and Chelsea and Arsenal when he took them over. So he had a good squad, but more than that, he had a squad that had a strong team culture, a strong team identity, and they played for one another. And so what Arne Slot did very, very well during his championship winning season was he managed the group. He got their respect. He did tweak some things tactically here and there, but a lot of the Jurgen Klopp DNA was still present. The work rate, the energy, the commitment, and as I said, the culture, the spirit, and the playing together. And I think that gradually what has happened over time is that has gradually faded. And in that first season, another thing that helped him a lot was he never really had to make a lot of changes because they weren't particularly hit by injuries. However, there was one overriding weakness that I think we all saw during that first season, and something that he admitted during the close season. And that was an inability to rotate. And that was clearly an area that he struggled in. And I think that we saw it most clearly the week that they played PSG in the Champions League and followed that up with the Carabao Cup final against Newcastle United. Liverpool were out of gas and they lost both games, basically. And okay, they were well ahead in the league at that point, and they certainly closed out the season winning the league, as we all know. And that last game against Tottenham was done in fine style. But I think one thing that needs to be pointed out was you look at Jurgen Klopp's last season and you look at Arne Slot's first season. The difference overall was 2 points. Arne Slot in his first season at Anfield only got 2 more points than Jurgen Klopp did in his final season at the helm. And actually, the records were pretty much identical. They scored the same number of goals, which I believe was 86 or something like that. And they conceded the same number of goals, which was 41. And I think that you can say, well, okay, they were kind of on the beach for the last 3 or 4 games because they'd already clinched the league title. And I think that that's a fair comment. But at the same time, there wasn't that much difference. And the big difference was Manchester City and Arsenal, their performance levels dropped significantly. So that shouldn't detract from what Arne Slot accomplished at Liverpool, but I think that's a fact that you need to note. So those were the mitigating circumstances for Arne Slot. Good squad, great team spirit, he managed them well. So then we went into the close season and Liverpool did something that they hadn't done for, well, I don't think they'd ever done it under FSG to such a degree, which they spent big. And at the same time, they also shipped out a lot of squad players primarily, but also Trent had gone to Real Madrid, and then they did get good money for Luis Diaz going to Bayern Munich, but clearly Diaz was still at the peak of his powers. Other players left, like Darwin Núñez, who I always felt was a little underrated at Liverpool. He was never going to be an Erling Haaland. He would get some goals, but he brought other qualities to the team and to the games. So they lost a lot of players and they brought in new players. And okay, lots of changes. That's always going to be a difficult task maybe for a manager. And then, of course, we had the tragedy with Diogo Jota. With the benefit of hindsight, I think one critical mistake that Arne Slot made was he tried to shoehorn in all of his new signings as best he could. And so Liverpool, all of a sudden, some of the assets and strengths that we saw from the previous season were gone. So, okay, Luis Diaz had left, so you could say quite rightly he hadn't been replaced. But a key player like Andy Robertson, who he's past his best, like we know that, but so is Virgil van Dijk, so is Alisson Becker, players of that era of Jurgen Klopp, but still a good player and still good enough to be contributing to this team. I think Arne Slot made a mistake there. He could have brought in Milos Kerkez a lot more easily because Robertson's not just a good player, but he's a big, big influence on the team. And so you've got all these little situations where maybe he tried to shoehorn in all these players and it changed the chemistry of the team. Added to that, certain players, and okay, Cody Gakpo's taken a lot of slack, and Alexis McAllister has really dropped off. So some of the returning players were definitely not at the same level as the title-winning season. So what do you do in that kind of situation? It's not always easy. I know that a couple of his complaints have been that he doesn't like a big squad. Well, I think that if you're going to be chasing trophies on 4 fronts, that you need a fairly big squad. And injuries. And in my opinion, and some may disagree with me, injuries have only really been a factor for Liverpool in the last few games, especially as they've lost a lot of their attacking players. That said, they still have a lot of good players in the team. And whilst that may affect the results of the team, what hasn't changed from first game to last is what we see on the field. Liverpool are not a particularly well-coached team. They don't press, they don't defend, they don't attack, there's no real patterns of play. And even if Liverpool have certain situations, these are things that a coach to some degree can at least put an imprint on the team. And I'm not the first fan. I'm not the first pundit, whatever you want to call me, to say there's been no imprint of style upon Liverpool this season. There's no identity to Liverpool this season. So a lot of fans say, okay, well, it wasn't always a bed of roses with Jurgen Klopp. And I would agree with that. But yet Jurgen Klopp was able to make us believe. I think that was one of the big things, that when he came into the club, he said that he had to make us into believers. And he was very successful in that department. So a lot of people have said, well, after Liverpool won the title under Jurgen Klopp, they had a bad season the year afterwards. Now, I'm someone that believes there's a little bit of a myth about the season after Liverpool won the league. Obviously, they had their difficulties this year, but in my opinion, for what it's worth, I think that was one of Jurgen Klopp's best campaigns. So let's just go over that season and then let's compare it to this season. So first of all, up until Christmas, Liverpool were top of the league. They were 5 points clear at the top after hammering Crystal Palace 7-0. And as we all remember, that was the COVID season. So Liverpool were in good shape. In fact, they only had one loss up until that point. And ironically, that was the 7-2 hammering against Aston Villa. And one interesting fact about games about Aston Villa, prior to the loss yesterday, that was Liverpool's only loss at Villa Park in their last 11 visits. And I'm talking about the league now. I'm discounting maybe that League Cup defeat when Liverpool put out their youngsters. So that was their only loss up until Christmas. And then after Christmas, Liverpool went through a really serious run of injuries that basically took out the core of the team. Virgil van Dijk had already gone earlier in the season, thanks to the infamous Jordan Pickford incident at Goodison. And then he totally lost his central defensive core with Gomez, Matip, etc., all falling to injury. And Klopp made a mistake that season that he subsequently acknowledged, in as much as he put Henderson and Fabinho into central defence to try to compensate. And Liverpool went on that awful run where I believe they lost like 6 home games in a row. There were no fans in the stadium. It was a very dismal time, an awful run. And of course, Liverpool began to slide down the league. Now, Klopp solved the problem. And what did he do? He did something that I don't think Arne Slot would do in his wildest dreams. He brought 2 academy kids, Nate Phillips and Ryan Williams, who is still there, by the way. He's still at Anfield to this day. He brought them into the team. He dropped the defensive line back so they weren't exposed so much they didn't have the same pace as the players that they were replacing. And then he took things from there. And in the last 10 games, Liverpool won 8. They drew 2, which was the best form run of any team in the division, including Manchester City, who won the league that year. And the whole thing was kind of highlighted by, towards the end of the season, the goal by Alisson Becker against West Bromwich Albion. So, okay, that was one of those iconic moments that any team can get at any random time. But the point is this: take away that middle section of the season, Liverpool were arguably the best team in the country up until Christmas and those last 10 games of the season. Can you say that about Liverpool this year? And the answer has to be no. And Jurgen Klopp showed his ability as a coach to pull something out of the fire. And that got the Reds through that season, finishing 3rd, qualifying for the Champions League. And then they had a brilliant season after that. So we've seen Arne Slot coach now for 2 years. So year one, everything went in his favor. Year two, he's consistently struggled with difficulties. And we have a situation now where the narrative is that he's going to stay, but yet many, many players are going to leave. So it's not just that the legends, as they're called, and rightly so, Mo Salah, Andy Robertson are going. But Alisson Becker, who could choose to stay, is apparently thinking of leaving and seriously thinking of leaving as well. And Liverpool Echo just listed 10 potential departures this year. So this season, after the big transfer spend, everything was built to be Liverpool won the league in convincing style, and they are going to go for it now, show their intent. They're going to bring in these great players, Florian Wirtz, Isak and company, and they are going to set up the new Liverpool football empire, or whatever you want to call it. And of course, it just hasn't worked out that way. So Arne Slot then changed it from the optimism after the first 5 games, even though Liverpool didn't play particularly well, all of a sudden it was a transitional season. So whether Slot's in charge or somebody else next year, don't you think that Liverpool are going to be in a real transitional season? This isn't a quick fix. Will Liverpool be challenging for the title next year? I wouldn't put money on it. I wouldn't put it on it at all. So I think Liverpool fans, that we have to be realistic on where we're at. I think that there is the Liverpool way. Liverpool is is a great club of having traditions. And I mean, in my lifetime of supporting them, the lowest they've ever finished in the league is 8th. So no other club has been anywhere near that level of consistency. But I do think there's too much evidence this time around that Arne Slot, if he stays, is he going to turn things around? Is he going to use his academy? I mean, like, that's another issue that's been bubbling along in the background. That a lot of the top junior players, 16 and below, are looking elsewhere at other clubs. And look, coming back to Jurgen Klopp, and I feel bad in a sense, but a lot of us are. In his final season at Anfield, briefly Liverpool were chasing the quadruple, and they did have a really bad run of injuries yet again. But Liverpool had a definite style of play, and that was seen in the Carabao Cup final. One thing that Jurgen Klopp used to do routinely was about the hour mark, bring on 3 players. And that was to keep the energy levels up. And yeah, they had their patterns and the way that they like to play. What did he do in the final with all those injuries? Who remembers Klopp's kids? Yeah, he brought on academy players. And so the point is, Jurgen Klopp had a definite style of play. Obviously, it was one that we enjoyed. But he was prepared to use his bench, and he was prepared to go beyond his bench if necessary and bring in academy youngsters. And if you look at Rio Engamoa this year, I mean, I keep hearing about how he has to be protected and all this kind of stuff. And then you look at another youngster like Trey Neone and what a brilliant player he is. Well, I don't know if Trey Neone's really a brilliant player because he only gets like 4 or 5 minutes on the few games that he gets in. I mean, so how can you really see? From what I've seen online of the youth games and everything, he looks okay. Doesn't stand out, and maybe he won't because of his playing position. But the point is, these youngsters need to be getting more time, and especially in a season when so many senior players' levels have dipped. So I think giving them time and then sending a message to the senior players that, hey, if you're not quite there, then somebody else will come in and do the job. And I think these are reasons why the change is needed. And coming back to that COVID season, Jurgen Klopp admitted he made a mistake and he remedied that by playing academy players. I just don't hear anything similar in terms of Arne Slot, whether you want to call him manager, coach, or whatever, of him acknowledging that maybe he might have done better on one or two occasions. Because what we are seeing time and again are same old tired Liverpool performances. Attacking, defending, pressing, restarts, you name it. Liverpool are not doing well in any of those areas. And look, will they make the Champions League? Looks like it's between Liverpool, Brighton, who are a long shot, Bournemouth. And I mean, I'm one of those fans that I would like to see them beat Manchester City, because I think the Manchester City issue is a wider issue. I mean, I'm a football fan as well as a Liverpool fan. So I think it would be very bad for football if Manchester City were to win this year when they face serious charges, but yet in the last 18 months have bought more than a full team of players. But again, you know, I'm coming off topic here. So Liverpool may kind of limp into the Champions League next year, but do I have any confidence there will be a change week to week in their performances and their play? I think the majority of Liverpool fans would share my opinion that the answer is no. So I hate to be negative from that point of view, but I have to be honest at the same time. So that's the situation as I see it. I'd love for people to start subscribing to our channel and commenting, because I'm trying my best. You know, I'm on Substack now. I want to start establishing contacts with Liverpool fans, not just throughout the USA where I live now, but all over the world, because Liverpool are one of the iconic and best supported clubs in world football. So love to hear from you. Please subscribe, like the video, and I will see you, well, certainly after the last game of the season. So let's hope that things can be a little bit brighter after the Brentford game next weekend. Until then, you'll never walk alone, and signing off for now. This is Coach Ralph saying goodbye. Bye now.